Angie Vishyanan, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program to connect pre-law students to attorneys for mentoring so they can learn more about the legal profession before they dive in. And we started doing these Zoom meetups where I've been inviting guest speakers who are attorneys and law school admissions consultants and pre-law advisors and all sorts of people to come and chat with you guys to give you information that might help you in your legal career journey. So I'm excited today to present Kristen Halchiotis, who is a criminal defense attorney in North Carolina, and she's going to talk to you today about her practice experience, which spans going from the Assistant District Attorney to going to opening up her own firm and being a criminal defense lawyer. So Kristen, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Angie. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here today to speak with all of you. Feel free to turn on your cameras to interact if you want to. I don't necessarily want to be the only person on camera, but if not, that's fine too, whatever makes you feel comfortable. If you have questions for me at any point in time, please feel free to ask. I don't know if Angie wants you to put it in the chat, or you're always free to unmute yourself and interrupt me with a question. That's perfectly fine. But like Angie said, my name's Christon Halkiotis. I am an attorney in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I've been practicing law since 2004, which is troubling because it sounds like a really long time ago, because it kind of is. But anyway, I digress. I am a native of North Carolina and grew up in Chapel Hill. That is the home of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I think the fact of being from Chapel Hill is likely why I did not attend Chapel Hill, either undergrad or law school. I went out of state to Rutgers University in New Jersey for my undergrad degree in political science and philosophy. And then I came home to North Carolina and attended the North Carolina Central University School of Law, go Eagles, class of 2004. While I was in law school, I had some things that I really enjoyed. I was a law review nerd, I'm not gonna lie. It was so much fun. I was articles editor my third year. It was a great use of my time. Do I necessarily use a lot of Blue Book citations? No, I don't. These days, I mean, I get Blue Book citation tattoos. You know, when you make case law as an attorney, you know, might as well get it tattooed on your arm. But anyway, I also worked for the DA's office in a neighboring county for 2.5 years while I was in law school. And my internship there was fantastic because it allowed me to learn in a very practical manner. It's that practical application of law that is so very important. And I was able to try cases under the third-year practice rule. And I was able to work the kinks out so that when I got my first job after I graduated, I could jump right into district court prosecuting misdemeanors. I already knew like what I was doing. You know, people were impressed with that. And I'm so glad that I had that opportunity. I knew I wanted to be a prosecutor, and I didn't realize how that experience would also serve me later down the road when I switched sides, but I'll get to that. I had been practicing for about 10 years in 2014 when I decided that I was going to take the state specialization exam. And in North Carolina, as many other states too, the state bar offers specialization. So you go through a peer review process, or you have to list out your however many previous jury trials you've had, opposing counsel, judges you've appeared in front of for those hearings. You have to take a 6-hour full day exam. It was actually, I thought it was harder than the bar exam, and it was all in my practice area. And then if you pass the exam, you pass the peer review process, you meet the qualifications, you've had enough CLE, you are recognized as a board certified specialist. And so I've had that designation since 2014. I just got that renewed last year in 2019. It's good for 5 years. And it was just a professional benchmark that I set for myself. There aren't a lot of prosecutors or public defenders for that matter. I always advocate for lawyers in public service to go ahead and get those designations because they're so important. They promote public trust and faith and confidence in our judicial system. And I think that is so important for district attorneys, for public defenders, for judges, and not just necessarily for private attorneys. And there also definitely need to be more women, more minorities who are going for those specializations as well. And I know I come from the perspective, obviously a woman's perspective, but women are still very underrepresented in high-level criminal litigation. And so I always love to see more women take an interest in that. It's exciting work. I love it. I basically went to law school and sat through all those civil law classes so that I could practice criminal law, because that was the only way to the degree. It was the only way to get a license, and I love it. One of the things that really helped kind of set me up as well for success and for the eventual business opportunity that came my way was being a community volunteer. And I think a lot of times volunteering in the community isn't afforded the respect that it should be necessarily. And 2 years after I started practicing law, I joined the Junior League of Greensboro. And for anybody who doesn't know about the Junior League, it is a charitable women's organization that is dedicated to developing the potential of women, promoting volunteerism, and improving the community through the trained action and leadership of volunteers. And having the experience of working in the Junior League for so long and eventually serving as president of our city's Junior League gave me the business experience to be able to take on the challenge of opening my own law firm. I had thought about opening my own law firm for many years. It was always something in the back of my head, but I always kicked that thought out of my head pretty quickly. Thinking, oh, Kristen, you don't have any business experience. You've never been in the private sector. What makes you think you can just jump right out there and do it? And well, what made me just realize I could jump right out there and do it is that I ran as, volunteer CEO, an 800-member organization, the Junior League of Greensboro. And I realized that, hey, you know what, QuickBooks, it's actually not that hard. All of these mental blocks that I had were completely unfounded. I realized they were just honestly silly. And I just needed to take that next step and take that leap and open my own law firm. The other thing I will say about the Junior League and about volunteer service in general, you're actually going to be able to learn a lot of skills that you might not necessarily learn from practicing law. So many important skills that I learned, like creating agendas for meetings, running meetings, time management. A lot of those things, those are all skills that I learned as a leader in the Junior League. I didn't learn those things practicing law. There's a lot of things that I have not learned practicing law, and those are all examples of some of those things. My hat goes off to people who come right out of law school and who open up their own law firm. I think one thing that's important to think about is what you're going to be learning, both on the legal side of things and on the business side of things. I had the advantage, after spending 15 years in the prosecutor's office, of knowing the law really well. Right. So when I came out into private practice, into that world, into the business world, opening my own firm, I was learning business, but I wasn't necessarily having to learn law at the same time. So there can be an advantage to working for somebody else when you come out of law school, whether it's a private firm, whether it is a prosecutor's office, whether it's a public defender's office. If you want that trial experience, I would highly recommend a prosecutor's office. But the carryover, and I know I've talked with Angie about this quite a bit, the carryover that I've experienced from one side to the other has been very surprising to me. There was a transition. My transition was able to be so seamless, and it was seamless in a way that I actually was not expecting. I wasn't expecting it to be so easy. I wasn't expecting it to be so seamless. Sure, there have been moments, especially at the beginning, where I thought to myself, wow, this is so bizarre because last week I'm advising police officers on how to get confessions out of people legally. And this week I'm telling people to stop talking to the police. So other than a little bit of that strange dichotomy, the transition has been extremely seamless because my knowledge of the law, my foundation was strong, and it's all based off that same foundation. So that's why what I was talking about today, I told Angie, oh, my title is going to be Two Sides, One Constitution, because I've learned now that that's actually very accurate, right? We have one Constitution, and our Constitution delineates different responsibilities for people. We all serve as checks and balances on each other. Criminal defense attorneys, prosecutors, we are each other's checks and balances. And at the end of the day, actually, prosecutors have a higher ethical duty, and prosecutors actually have more of a responsibility, because not only do they have to ensure that victim rights are taken into account by the judge, they also have to make sure that defendants' rights are protected too, right? That defendants have access to counsel. If there's somebody being held in jail who doesn't have a lawyer and they're writing letters to the court saying they want a lawyer appointed, the prosecutor's responsibility to get that person in front of a judge so that they can apply for a court-appointed lawyer if they need one appointed to them. The ethical doctrine is very different for prosecutors and for defense attorneys, but other things are very, very similar. And when I talk about that ethical duty, those of you in law school who've had professional responsibility, who maybe have taken the MPRE already, you'll know that there is a special ethical rule that puts special responsibilities on prosecutors, Rule 3.8. If the prosecutor's ethical duty is to do justice, right? Every other kind of lawyer, criminal defense attorney, a civil attorney, regardless of what side, family law attorney, the duty is to zealously represent their client. That's my duty as a defense attorney. Every time I go into court on behalf of a client, my duty is to zealously represent them. But every time I went into court as a prosecutor, my duty was to do justice. The rules say the prosecutor is a minister of justice. And think about that for a minute, right? The prosecutor's job is not to zealously represent a victim. A prosecutor's job is not to zealously represent police. Okay, any prosecutor who's been around for a while has probably prosecuted police. I prosecuted police. Lots of prosecutors have. Certainly, interests diverge in that sense. But the duty is not to zealously represent them, right? They might be your witnesses most of the time, but your duty is not to zealously represent them. That's what the police department attorney is there for in civil court. That's what they're there for. Prosecutor's duty is to do justice. And in different cases, justice can take different forms. Sometimes justice comes in the form of a conviction. Sometimes justice comes in the form of imprisonment. Sometimes justice comes in the form of a dismissal. And prosecutors are also the people who wield the most amount of power in the judicial system. It's not judges. It's not defense attorneys by any means. It's prosecutors, because a prosecutor is the only person who can sign a dismissal form and turn someone loose, set them free. They're the only person who can do that. And I say I had a seamless transition from one side to the other. I think the one thing that was hardest for me to get past was the shift of power, because that power balance completely changes, right? I go from having all the power as a prosecutor with the ability to dismiss a charge that I think is not supported by probable cause. I can dismiss that. In fact, if a charge is not supported by probable cause, Rule 3.8 also says that a prosecutor cannot proceed with it, right? Prosecutor has to dismiss that charge. So I go from that to when I see an injustice happening, I have to go and explain to the prosecutor what's going on, ask them to take a look at the case, and really appeal to them to do the right thing and be a zealous advocate for my client in the process. But I'm not the one who can right the wrong herself like I used to be. And that took some getting used to. And there are still days when it's a little bit frustrating, that the power balance is so different. And, I make sure to tell my clients that the first time I meet with them, especially my clients who are incarcerated, because they need to understand that the system's not stacked in our favor. It is stacked against defendants every step of the way.
Yeah, actually, Kristen, I wanted to ask you, so, as your duties as a prosecutor, can you dig into them a little bit more? Because I think that talking about the types of decisions that prosecutors make may illustrate to them how the prosecutors have so much power, in choosing the charge or in issuing plea deals or whatever it is. I think, if you can talk a little bit more about their duties, it might help them understand a little bit better, like what's the differences.
Sure. And I'll talk from the experience I had that the last 12 of my 15 years as a prosecutor, I was a high-level felony prosecutor. I prosecuted most of the child sex cases in my jurisdiction, felony domestic violence, homicide, things like that. And so because of that kind of caseload I had, I was working with investigators really from day one. And I was the person that they would come to with the particular cases, and they would staff them with me. I'm the one, as the prosecutor, who would listen to the evidence that they had. I would decide on what charges would be brought against the defendant. And these were high-level felony charges that could carry up to life in prison. I would decide on those charges, how many of them, which particular charges. I would decide, which charges would go to the grand jury. I pretty much would help direct the investigation from the very beginning. And when it came time to make a plea offer, so in our state, what I always tell my clients, don't you ever talk to the police, because they can lie to you with impunity. The Supreme Court has said that, right? Police can engage in trickery to get confessions out of defendants. And police might say, oh, I'll tell the DA to go easy on you. This is going to help you in court. Well, in my state, police do not have the authority to negotiate on behalf of the state, right? That's just the prosecutors. So that's another place where the prosecutors have that power to decide what plea offer gets made. Is it going to be a charge bargain, which means, okay, your client pleads to A and we dismiss charges B, C, and D? Or is it going to be a sentence bargain where we actually write up the whole terms of the plea and it's fully negotiated? So your client pleads to charges A and B, we dismiss C and D, the charges get consolidated, and he goes to prison for X amount of time. And so hence fully negotiated. And then it just has to go in front of a judge, in essence, to get rubber stamped. So as you can see, the prosecutors are really driving the train, and they have all the power at every single juncture. They're the ones with all the power. And really, as the defense attorney, you're just, making sure that they're not overstepping. You're making sure that their assessment of the facts are correct. That's where you have to be able to, your law cold, and you can recite it real fast. And come off, say to a prosecutor, look, I think you're going to have a real problem with this element of this crime if we go to trial. Why don't we reevaluate your plea offer, and let's talk about something different? So there's so much art to the negotiation. There's a lot of finesse involved. But it really is, negotiation, of course, hinges on how well you know the law. And it also hinges on your opponents knowing how well you try cases. And so that was another thing that was helpful, in going out into private practice. People know I can try cases. And when you have a lawyer on the other side that is a formidable opponent, it can change negotiations. It can certainly change negotiations. And I did see a question, I think, in the chat about why did I switch sides? It's a great question. So, and I didn't really get into it. I had said that, I had considered at some points in time over my 15 years of practice at that point in 2019, I had considered switching. I had considered opening up my own shop. And it was always the business side of things that held me back. The business side held me back. I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. The thought of running a business scares me. There was fear involved. right? It's a big proposition. But then after serving, I served as junior league president 2018 to 2019, and I had to do that deep financial dive and like, get down and dirty with QuickBooks and realize this is not that hard. I should be out here doing this because I really want to try, right? It could be this amazing thing, or it could be the big, like most colossal failure I've ever had. But I don't want to get to be 90 years old and look back and think, I really should have tried my hand at this because I think I could have been pretty good. I wanted to see if I could be good. And it's been a success.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit more about how do defense attorneys advocate for their clients? What is the best tools that they have to advocate for their clients?
Best tools that they have to advocate for their clients, I'd say their knowledge of the law and their ability to negotiate effectively for their client. One of the litmus tests I have is I never do anything to a prosecutor that would have annoyed me if a defense attorney did it to me when I was a prosecutor. Because I lived it for 15 years, and if somebody sat down in my chairs across from my desk and did something that annoyed the crap out of me, you better believe I don't do things like that to my former coworkers. And it's an interesting situation because literally all 35 of my opposing counsel are former coworkers now. And so it's a little, it's weird. and it's not a situation that a lot of people are going to find themselves in. Because with the civil bar, you're dealing with all kinds of attorneys, and it's not a situation as unique as this one. But I really just coming from a place of respect is huge, because I respect the work they do. I used to work with them. I used to do that work. And having a respect for that, but also making sure that I'm advocating really effectively for my clients. And that starts the day that I go meet my clients at the jail, because I have to get their buy-in to everything that I'm doing. And I have to make them understand and get them to a place where they understand that everything I'm doing is hopefully going to pay off for them in the long run. And it means, going to the jail when I say I'm going to be there and showing up. Because a lot of folks who've been through the system before and who have had people who've let them down and lawyers who have let them down don't follow through, and their actions don't reflect what they're telling their clients. And my appointed clients, I get appointed to high-level felony cases. I get retained on high-level felony cases. And I make sure that every single client knows, regardless of how they came to my to be represented by me, whether they hired me and paid me, money, or whether I'm being paid by the state to represent them, because I believe that it is a responsibility of good lawyers to be on court-appointed lists, that they get treated the same. And I fight for everybody the same way. And you don't get one level of representation if I'm appointed on your case versus if you came and paid me to represent you. So those are all ways that I advocate for my clients. I'm in the jail quickly. I am talking to them from the very beginning. I am going to see the DA immediately to try to find, where I live, we don't have right to discovery until a case gets indicted into Superior Court. And so that doesn't always happen right away. So, I'll try to go look at police reports when I can, and try to get the ball rolling on stuff in advance. If it's a case where I need to get an investigator, go ahead and get an investigator, get them to start checking things out. If it's a situation where I have somebody who actually has an alibi, I want to jump on that as quickly as possible, so that I can get that information, get it to a DA. Sometimes the early advocacy starts with getting bond motions filed. When felony cases start and they're in district court, before they get indicted into our Superior Court, a lot of times my clients who are incarcerated want a bond motion, even if their bond is incredibly high, they have incredibly serious charges, and that is their choice. So usually file a bond motion, and it can also be a good opportunity to, because we don't have access to police reports at that point, it can be a great way to find out what the evidence against my client is, because the state has to give justification for why they want to continue holding my client in jail under the bond that they're under. So that can be a good way to get a little preview, if you will, of what's to come. And that can be helpful, and that can help with my advocacy, because if I hear that their case is kind of weak, I can weave that into my strategy and then perhaps attack it another way with the prosecutor.
So tell me, and for people who are interested in possibly, pursuing this as a career path in the future, is there any way that they can get experience before law school or during law school? How can they start learning more about the criminal defense or prosecution arena?
So I think, during law school, what's going to be really important is doing externships or clinical programs with your school. Practical education, practical legal education is so important. And that's one of the reasons I'm so thankful for my law school, North Carolina Central. We have a nationally ranked clinical program. It was nationally ranked when I was there. It still is, I believe. And I, was able to have a classroom class that was about all the criminal statutes, and they're criminal statutes that I still use every day to this day. But I got my deep dive. I was able to do that during law school. I was also able to intern in the DA's office under the third-year practice rule and try cases. I was able to help felony prosecutors with some high-level felonies as well. And so that exposure was everything. And it was just as important as sitting in a criminal law class. And at your law school, wherever you might attend, if there are professors who have actually practiced law, my advice would be to seek them out and take their classes and pick their brains, because those stories are so helpful. The experiences that they have that they can share, and everybody loves to tell war stories, and the experiences that they have had that they can share with you, I promise are going to be invaluable for that.
Awesome. So do you have any advice on skills that students should be developing if they want to be good in this area?
I think in terms of skill set, organization is going to be incredibly important. And of course, it's going to be incredibly important if you want to run your own business, but that's a whole other thing. But organization too, if you want to be a defense attorney, if you want to be a prosecutor, certainly if you want to be a prosecutor, you got to keep stuff straight in terms of cases. You're going to be putting together and piecing together cases that you're going to put up in front of the court. And the same thing if you're a defense attorney, you've got to be able to keep everything organized as well. I think it's incredibly important. Your skills with other people. I can tell you, defense attorneys who are all bluster and who come into court treating people poorly, I can tell you that their clients, they're being disadvantaged by that kind of behavior. They're really being disadvantaged by that kind of behavior. And what I have learned over the years is that when people act that way, it's a cover for the fact they don't know the law very well. Let your knowledge of the law be what speaks for you in many occasions, and know when you've got to go a little bit harder. And again, that's finesse, and that skill set just takes some time, but it's one that you can certainly develop. And again, if you're very interested in criminal defense, I highly recommend being a prosecutor. There are a lot of people who work in a prosecutor's office for 2 or 3 years and then go into defense work. And the reason why is you get to try a whole lot of cases in a very short period of time. And granted, they're going to be misdemeanor cases generally, but you get to try them in a very, very short period of time. And some days in our district courts, we don't have juries, they're all bench trials. But you could get 5, 6 trials in a day. And of course, this is like before COVID. So right now things are a little crazy, but hopefully we'll be back to something a little bit more normal, at least in the next year or so. But I highly recommend, if you are thinking about criminal defense, I highly recommend a prosecutor's office. Public defender's office is great too, but you just get actually more raw trial experience in the prosecutor's office.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Kristen? Feel free to ask away either in the chat box or jump on camera and ask. But What are some of the experiences that you had while you were in law school, Kristen? What did you do between your first and second summers, and how did those impact your choices?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record because between my first and second summer, I interned in the DA's office. And at that point, I could not do third year practice. I hadn't had enough classes yet to qualify for third year practice. But I worked for the elected DA, and I was able to write briefs for him and memos. And I was able to help him with trial prep and things like that. And then I continued interning there my second year, like during the school year. Like I would go to class and then go to court. And my classmates to this day that I'm still in close contact with, they still laugh that I would come to school every day wearing a suit. And it was like, early 2000s, so it was like this ill-fitting polyester suit, but I thought I was like awesome. So at any rate, and then the summer between second and third year, I also was back at the same DA's office, and I was able to take advantage of an IOLTA grant. So, there's generally, to get any money, you've got to be out in the private sector, right? As a summer associate, something like that. But I was able to apply for an IOLTA grant, and I got that for that summer, which was awesome. So it was like I was being paid to work at the DA's office. So that's something that I would definitely encourage you to check out in whatever state you're in, because those IOLTA grants happen everywhere. And so that way you don't necessarily have to be, if you need some money, you don't have to be necessarily locked into working at a private firm if that's not what you want to do. So that's definitely something to explore. And then I actually I continued volunteering there through the end of law school. And actually, after I passed the bar, it was a couple of months before I got hired to my first ADA job, which was my only ADA job that I was at for 15 years. And so it served me really, really well. So I didn't really switch it up too much in law school. But all that experience was super important because the elected DA that I interned for, he did not have an opening for me when I graduated, but the DA 2 counties over who did hire me, he called the elected DA that I had worked for 2.5 years and said, tell me about her, should I hire her? And that recommendation was one of the reasons I got hired. So all of that toiling and all of that grinding and working hard, it will pay off. It's just one of those things where you kind of just have to go through it.
Yeah. Wow. And did you know that, you always wanted to be in criminal defense even before going to law school?
I knew I wanted to be a prosecutor. I thought I was going to be career. I thought I was going to be a career prosecutor. And many years down the road, I might go back. I don't know. For right now, I love doing what I'm doing.
Oh, sorry. How did you become exposed to it? Like this idea of becoming a prosecutor?
I think it was in college. In college, I actually interned when I was home one summer on break, I interned with some of the judges in that same courthouse where I interned later in law school. And I was so fascinated by that. And so I think I did get some exposure to it then. And I thought, you know what, I'd really like to be a prosecutor.
That's interesting. And you went straight to law school, straight out of college?
I took 1 year off. Worked some different jobs, and I had worked as a litigation file clerk at a law firm in Princeton, New Jersey when I was in college, and I realized that I needed to go to law school. I didn't want to practice civil law, but I wanted to be one of the people who was making decisions.
Awesome. All righty. Well, does anybody else have any questions for Kristen? Come on, don't be shy. Y'all feel free to jump on camera and ask. If not, you can ask them in the chat box, and I'll make sure to ask them to Kristen along the way. But I want to make sure that we answer any questions that you guys have about either of the career paths that Kristen has had. What are some of the things that you would advise for people who want to open up their own solo law practice one day?
I would definitely advise you to get some kind of experience, either in the business world or in the legal world before you open up your own shop. Because again, like I mentioned, I only had to learn business right now because I have 15 years of law under my belt. And I think it would be really overwhelming if for somebody to have to learn both of those things at the same time. I think it's doable. I don't know how advisable it would be. I think that's the difference. Or if there is somebody who's a more seasoned attorney that you can work with, or like make an of counsel or something. you might want to think about going that route. But it seems like it could potentially be overwhelming. It seems like it could potentially be, you might, I hate to say, like, malpractice issues pop up, more frequently. But when you're in a situation where you have other people with experience to lean on until you get that legal experience and sort of have that knowledge, that can be a very positive thing.
Oh, we have a question in the chat box. What advice do you have for someone who's looking to become a domestic violence prosecutor specifically? Women's rights and advocacy and sexual assault work are the students' passions.
That is awesome. Thanks for the question, Emma. And I think your name sounds familiar. I think you might follow me on Instagram. Hey, awesome. Well, so I was a domestic violence prosecutor and a sexual assault prosecutor for a long time. And, I think that just boning up on all the criminal law that you can, and, working in a DA's office, in law school, getting those people, as references for you. So whatever DA's office you want to go to, you're going to have some sterling references from other prosecutors saying, hey, this girl's great. You really need to hire her. I would definitely recommend that. Of course, criminal law, just making sure you're boning up on evidence, criminal law, criminal procedure, all of those really important subject areas for us. Even if there's a place, a county, particular county you're interested in, kind of researching them, seeing what specialized courtrooms they have that you can go observe. And I know if you're at Campbell, Emma, Wake County has a dedicated domestic violence courtroom that actually hears the 50B civil restraining orders along with the criminal cases at the same time. It's pretty groundbreaking here in North Carolina, because I went there to observe it back in like 2006 when it was brand new. And we were thinking about something like that in my county, which never actually got off the ground. But, being able to speak about things like that. And then once you're in, a DA's office, making sure your supervisors know that you're really interested in that. And kind of, it's always good also to read, keep abreast of research, of law journal articles that talk about it. There's been a lot in the last decade or so about evidence-based prosecution, why it's good, why it's not good. I have a little different feeling of evidence-based prosecution as a defense attorney than I used to as a prosecutor. But just keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on with domestic violence prosecutions in general can be helpful. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Hi, Kristen. I have a question. I'm Alexandra Fortier.
Sure.
I wonder, I'm very interested in criminal. This always fascinated me, but this area of law, but I still have a long way to go. I'm learning. So it's like your seminar has been great. I wanted to ask you, what made you switch from prosecution to defense, or is there like a term that you it expires and you have to resign from the prosecution part, or what was the reason?
No, that's a great question. There was nothing, no time limit or anything like that. It was just something that I wanted to do for myself. I had always been curious about the other side. I was sort of at the point in my career, I was ready for a new challenge. I wanted to spend some time fighting for individuals' rights because, I had practiced law for 15 years at that point, and I had never represented an actual client. And it was mind-blowing the first time I stepped into court and I actually represented a person. And it's a fantastic feeling, and I'm really excited that I'm getting to experience that now. So it was more just of like a personal growth thing for me, and chasing down a challenge that I wanted to take on. I also think that if you stay too long in something in one place, I think as humans, we all enjoy comfort to a degree. And I think that if we don't continually challenge ourselves, we don't grow, and we don't maybe maximize the potential that we have. Because I can tell you that in the last 13 months, I have grown more, both as a person and with respect to my career, than I've grown probably in the 10 or 15 years before that. It's been it was groundbreaking for me. So really it was about a personal challenge and about a growth opportunity. and to see what I was capable of too in running a business. You know, I think in law too, we see that, and you'll all of those of you who are in law school now, you'll see that there are people who are really good lawyers. There are people who are really good business people. Those things do not always mesh, right? You can be a fantastic lawyer and you can be terrible at running a business, but you can be a great business person, and you cannot be so effective as an attorney. And so for those folks, it's probably important to think about, how am I going to maximize the skills and talents that I do have? Do I need to join forces with somebody? Like if I'm a great lawyer, but I can't manage running a business, that side of things, can I form a partnership with another lawyer who is really good at that? Those are just other things to consider and to keep in mind. And I'm seeing another question in the chat. Do you ever see yourself on the other side of the bench? It's a great question. I would love to be a judge one day. Are
you judges or appointed in North Carolina?
So in North Carolina, they're elected, but when there is a vacancy on the bench, the local bar has a vote, and the top 5 vote getters' names are submitted to the governor to appoint to that seat until the next election happens. And actually in 2018, I did submit my name for a vacancy. I was in the top 5. I did not end up getting appointed to the seat, but that has kind of showed me that, you know, there's some potential for that in the future. And I think now, having seen both sides, I'm actually much better equipped to be a judge at some point down the road, because I do think it's important that a judge have seen, you know, I know I have no civil experience whatsoever at this point. Or very limited civil experience, I should put it that way. But you know, in terms of the criminal law, you know, seeing things from both sides, it's mind blowing. There were a lot of things that even after 15 years practicing law and criminal law that I had never taken into account. I had never set foot in the jail before, and that is kind of a really humbling experience. Let's see. Are judges, I'll take this question first. Are judges mixed like in federal court or specialized in North Carolina? So judges in North Carolina, they do everything. So we do not have specialized like criminal court judges, family court judges, civil court judges, juvenile court judges, nothing like that. Every judge kind of does everything. In our particular county, we have, there are some judges who are currently assigned to juvenile court or to DSS court or to civil court. But generally the rest of them rotate. So I think I know some states, I think New York has judges that are specially assigned to a particular area. And I think that's nice. It might allow you to become more of an expert. Let's see, what makes a lawyer more effective than others? I think everybody equates lawyers with talking a lot. I think the most effective lawyers are the ones who know how to shut up and listen too. How to listen, how to get things done without pissing people off. That's a big part of it. You know, I have to fight like a junkyard dog sometimes for my clients in court, but that's the difference. I reserve my fighting for in court. If we're out of court, I'm going to be civil. I'm going to be cordial. I'm going to treat all these people, all my opposing counsel who are my old coworkers, with a great deal of respect. But you know, they know I'll flip the switch in court if I have to. But I'm not going to do it in a personal way. I'm not going to do it in an attacking way. Because again, I've sat on that other side long enough to know what works, what doesn't work. And I never want to disadvantage either my current clients or my future clients by acting like a jerk. And I feel like we've kind of gotten away from some of that in the legal world. And I hope we can get back to more civility.
Yeah, I think, you know,
it's so important.
Yeah, it depends, I think, on who really your early career mentors were, because I think that there is a big push in kind of our modern day law practice to get back to civility, to professionalism, to treating others, you know, the way we want to be treated. But yeah, I mean, it's tough though, because as you'll learn in professional responsibility is you have that duty to advocate zealously, right? And people sometimes mistake that duty to mean that they need to go too far to be bossy or to be pushy or to be aggressive, sometimes needlessly so. But yeah, there are ways to still be very firm, negotiate, tough, but not aggressively. Or, not in a way that you're pissing other people off, and then not in a way that you're hurting your client's interests in the long run. Because if you're, ultimately a lot of what we do is try to avoid, litigation, or try to avoid, especially on the civil side. I think in criminal, it's a little more difficult, but on the civil side, you should be doing everything you can to help your clients resolve their issues without having to go to court. There's no, and ultimately that's a better resolution. It's going to be less expensive. It's going to be more time efficient. It's going to allow your clients to move on quickly. So, I think that there is a lot to say for ways that you can advocate for your client with a gentle approach and still, get really good results for them. Exactly. But yeah, I think that you have to realize too that the legal industry is actually smaller than you would think. The bar is very, very small. You'll start to see the same people over and over again in court. You'll start to get to know the same people at bar association events, at local events. You'll run into each other all the time, and people remember those things. People will always remember the way that you treated them. So,
exactly right.
So
and I hear these horror stories from my friends in the civil bar, and it's interesting to me. I think over the years, I've come up with a theory, and in criminal law, the state has all the power. So it's not the judge with the power; it's the prosecutor. So it really doesn't behoove a defense attorney to come in yelling and screaming at a DA, because you're not going to help your client, because the DA can just yank back a plea offer and say, well, oh, no dice. Okay. But in civil court, each attorney is kind of on the same footing. And so there's nothing to be lost by just putting on a show for their clients and acting like a jerk. But with the power balance we have, I always tell my clients, you need to understand, like when you're in court and you see me interact with the prosecutor, this is why I'm not going to act like a jerk with them, because I'm actually I'm helping you by being friendly with them, by joking with them until the judge comes in and we're actually in a hearing. I said, because I'm not going to treat them poorly, because that could just lead to a worse result for you. And if you want a lawyer who's going to yell and scream at opposing counsel, don't hire me, because I'm the wrong fit for you. But it's been interesting because I think my clients, and I've never been a defense attorney and not been without the experience of being a prosecutor, but my clients really love the fact that I was a prosecutor for so long. Like when I go meet new appointed clients in the jail and they say, you were a prosecutor for 15 years. I am so glad you're on my case, because at least you know how everything works and you can explain things to me. I never realized how that was going to translate so well on the other side.
Yeah, and sometimes it will be your clients who want you to be a jerk. You'll have to explain to them like, hey, just because I'm not yelling and screaming and throwing things, it doesn't mean that I'm not helping you out. Trust me. In many ways, it's probably better that I'm not yelling and screaming and throwing things.
And that's the thing. Like, I don't have to go crazy at trial if I'm able to go speak to the DA in the office, point out the flaws in the case, and secure a dismissal. You never even have to go sit in that chair for a trial.
Exactly. These things are tough. I think, clients, just like young lawyers, a lot of them have watched TV shows. They think they have a certain mindset about how the adversarial process should work. And they have an idea in their heads of what they want a lawyer to look like. Unfortunately, that the idea that they have in their head is not often a pleasant person. And I think that it's okay to develop your own style over time. I think especially, and I don't know, I don't want to speak for all women, but I know for me, when I was growing up, there were not a whole lot of role models of female lawyers being, on television or even in the news or anything. There just weren't that many. And the ones that were out there were really hard-nosed. They were more aggressive. And I think that I was really scared of, as I was going up through law school, that maybe I wasn't tough enough to do litigation, or maybe, I had to have a certain personality type. But that's simply not true. There's, dozens of ways to skin a cat, right? So there's dozens of ways to litigate. There's, there's lots of ways that you can develop your own style to advocate for your clients. And it does not make you a worse off lawyer if you're not, that tough personality. You can kill with kindness. You can. And you can still be just as effective at negotiating too without being hard-nosed. And so I think it's really important for people to know that because over time, as I started finding more women mentors in the profession and saw their styles and saw like they were perfectly pleasant people. There was nothing mean or prickly about them. And, they weren't bossy or bitchy or, the things that people say about female lawyers. And I still felt like they were great advocates. And, I saw them accomplish a lot of things that oftentimes some of our male attorneys weren't as good at because they weren't as diplomatic. And so I think that, you really need to make sure you go out there and find a lot of different types of mentors that look different, that act different, that sound different, that practice differently, and learning from all those different styles will help you hone and develop your style over time. As a young lawyer, you're not going to go in there with your own style yet, and you'll be feeling it out for most of your practice. You'll be feeling it out, try on different strategies, different approaches, see what works for you, but realize that, ultimately the best thing that you can do for your client is to develop your own style, advocate in a way that's true to yourself. Because you never want to, be an imposter by, impersonating somebody else's style when that's just not you. It may take some time to figure out what that style is, but over time you will find it. So don't be afraid if you think that you're not going to be like any of the lawyers you've seen on TV. That's probably a good thing.
And I think too, regardless of style, one thing that's really important to remember, whatever side you're going to be advocating for, is honesty and your word. Because, as a prosecutor, I had a running list in my head of the lawyers that I never trusted when they told me things, and that I would always go back and double check about. And so it is so incredibly important. And one way that served me well is that, when I go and talk to the DA for my clients, generally what I'm telling them is not going to be called into question. And certainly I would want them to double check behind me on things. And, I will always be upfront with information and say, look, my client tells me that blah, blah, blah. His mother tells me X, Y, Z, not representing things as fact when it's in fact coming from somebody else, but just making sure that everything I am saying is honest and true, because zealously representing your client doesn't mean you go and lie for them. It certainly does not mean that. And you could have a stellar career and then tell one lie, and all that good reputation that you have built up for a really long period of time, it's all for naught, and it's gone. It is gone.
Absolutely.
Kristen, I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm sorry if this is kind of misinformed, but I was wondering, the criminal defense or prosecutor attorney, and I understand you work in sexual assault and domestic violence. Can you also defend or prosecute cases, like, for example, for fraud of corporations, like, for example, Enron? You would be able to do that as a criminal defender or a criminal prosecutor, or it will be some other type of specialization?
No. So that's, so as a criminal, as a prosecutor can prosecute all different sorts of crime. And it just depends on the jurisdiction, how cases are assigned. Okay. Like, I used to be assigned to a certain type of cases. I had other coworkers who did fraud, who did, DWIs, who did arson, things like that. And of course, everything, and in the federal system, federal prosecutors are probably organized even more into teams with respect to different sorts of crimes. But yeah, as a defense attorney, I take everything. I do all kinds. I don't defend in federal court right now. I defend in state court, but I do everything from speeding tickets to first-degree murder.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for everything today. I've really appreciated you coming on and sharing your practice experience with everyone. If you guys want to hear even more of Kristen's story, we all just published a book together.
Yes.
And so Kristen wrote a chapter in our book Networked, and it's available on Amazon if you want to go check it out. And we'll be back on Thursday with another meetup, and we'll be hearing from Alex Sinatra about all the different things that you can pursue with your life on top of your law practice. So Alex is a lawyer who she's done so many things. She's a sports writer, contributor. She also has her own podcast. She's an in-house lawyer. So she's done a ton of things, and I think that you will really enjoy hearing from her. So come hang out with us on Thursday. And thank you again, Kristen, for your time. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All
Good
right.
luck to all you guys.
Have a wonderful week. Bye.